Good afternoon. I'm Chief Kevin Niedert. Spelling of my last name is N-I-E-T-E-R-T. On Saturday, October 18th, at about 4:13 in the morning, the South Euclid Police Department received multiple calls of a possible burglary in progress on Avondale, including an alarm drop from an alarm company. Upon officers' arrival, they observed evidence of forced entry to the rear door of the home and could hear a female screaming. As officers made entry into the home, they announced their presence. Officers observed a male, later identified as Ronnie McNary, on top of a female. Officers ordered Mr. McNary to the ground and to drop it. Mr. McNary ignored officers' commands, verbally responding, "Kill me," and continued assaulting the female with a knife. In order to protect the female from further assault, an officer fired 2 shots, incapacitating Mr. McNary. Mr. McNary was transported to Hillcrest Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 5:17 in the morning. The female victim was also transported to Hillcrest Hospital and treated for her injuries, and was released and is expected to make a full recovery. I think it's important to note that this whole event was captured on a body-worn camera. This was not a random act of violence. The female victim and Mr. McNary had an estranged relationship. The officers involved in this event were Detective Sergeant Rick Friedel, a 21-year veteran of the department, and Patrolman Steve Wilson, a 12-year veteran of the South Euclid Police Department. Both officers have been placed on paid administrative leave per our departmental policy. We contacted the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation to come out and assist us with the crime scene and the collection of evidence. The South Euclid Police Department will be conducting the investigation. Once the investigation is complete, we will turn it over to the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office for their review and a final ruling. I will say at this point in time, I appreciate your patience and understanding as we work through this process, and I'd like to stress that it's a process, and a process that's only begun and we have not completed it. I will attempt to answer any questions that you might have that I can. I cannot get into the minutia of the investigation, and after today, the South Euclid Police Department will be making no more official comments regarding this until after the ruling by Tim McGinty's office.
Chief, did you say, I'm sorry, BCI, they helped you with the crime scene. Are they also helping with the investigation of the shooting?
No, they are not. The South Euclid Police Department is conducting the investigation. BCI was solely responsible for the collection of the evidence and the processing of the crime scene.
How long do you think this investigation might take? I know there's a lot.
I'm thinking at least a 2 to 3 month period of time before the final ruling comes out and we get reports back from the coroner's office, from BCI. The prosecutor's office has had an opportunity to digest it.
How many times was he shot? Where on his body was he shot?
According to
Fired the shots.
According to the coroner's office, there were 2 shots fired. 1 shot went through Mr. McNary's neck. The other shot entered through the shoulder. And Officer Steve Wilson is the officer that fired his gun.
Did he break in, Scott Tilley, 19 Action News, did he break in the back door, Chief, do you know?
That is correct. The rear glass of the door was broken and the door frame was shattered from where they kicked the door in.
And he was the ex-boyfriend of the victim?
I prefer to use the estranged relationship. It's an on-again, off-again relationship.
But he had a lengthy criminal record, didn't he?
He has 11 cycles on his criminal history. A number of them are for violence, a prior arrest for domestic violence, a prior arrest for rape, prior arrest for felonious assault, kidnapping. He's got some prior convictions for those types of crimes, and he has a case that was adjudicated in 2012 that involved the same victim.
Can you talk a little bit about how you feel about the actions of your officers? Because obviously, to me, they saved the life of this young lady.
I'm not at liberty to share my opinion with the media I hope that you respect that the investigation is not complete. By sharing my opinion with the media, I would be prejudging that, and I don't think that that would be an appropriate position to take.
Did your officer have the opportunity to disable him, hit him in the leg? They could disable him instead of fatally shooting?
When we go through the police academy and we are trained, we are not trained to shoot for a hand. If you're going to draw your weapon and use deadly force, you are trained to shoot where it would be most effective. And what you're asking for would be asking for miracles.
Did they enter the front door, your officers, or the back door?
They entered through the back door of the residence.
The last known criminal arrest that you mentioned in 2012, was he on probation for that? Control probation?
That is correct.
Did part of that probation have anything to do with the victim, any contact with the victim, or was there any sort of restraining order involved there?
To my knowledge, there was no restraining order in place at the time that this event took place here in South Euclid. I'm not familiar enough with the record to know all the nuances of the sentencing.
When you said that incident was caught on a body camera, is that something that all the officers have? And if so, how long have you guys been using them?
We recently purchased body-worn cameras for all of our officers. They have not all been issued the camera. I'm sure that you can appreciate there's some training that was involved. We have a number of our officers that are out there currently wearing body-worn cameras. We are working towards making sure that they all have them on. We have enough cameras for that.
And about how long ago did you start, did the officers actually start wearing them?
Probably within the past month. In this particular case, oddly enough, Patrolman Steve Wilson had just been issued his body-worn camera that evening, received the training, and as luck would have it, we have that evidence today.
Was that the body camera program, was that in response to, the incident in Ferguson, Missouri became a hot topic nationally? Was that in response to that, or was that something you guys have been thinking about before that even happened?
Absolutely has nothing to do with what happened in Ferguson. Our department has been demoing body-worn cameras and evaluating the technology for the past 2 years. Some of it had to do with waiting for the technology to evolve and develop, and we didn't want to get on the technology wagon too soon in the event and then have to repurchase.
Chief, you mentioned the 2012 domestic abuse arrest that he was on probation for. Was it the same victim that you're aware of? Do you know?
That is correct.
It was the same.
Chief, for the benefit of late arrivals, I apologize for that. It was a difficulty. Could I ask you to walk through, briefly summarize what portion of the presentation we missed?
Yeah.
Thank you.
On Saturday, October 18th, at about 4:13 in the morning, the South Euclid Police Department responded to multiple calls of a possible burglary on Avondale. One of those calls involved a alarm drop from an alarm company. As officers arrived, they observed that evidence of forced entry to the rear door of the home. They could hear a female screaming for help. As the officers made entry into the home, they announced their presence. Officers observed a male later identified as Ronnie McNary on top of a female. Officers ordered Mr. McNary to the ground and to drop it. Mr. McNary ignored the officers' commands and verbally responded, "Kill me." He then continued assaulting the female with a knife, and in order to protect the female from further assault, officer fired 2 shots, incapacitating Mr. McNary. Mr. McNary was transported to Hillcrest Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 5:17 in the morning. The female victim in this case was also transported to Hillcrest Hospital. She was treated for her injuries and released and is expected to make a full recovery. And then, as you are aware, this whole event was captured on a body-worn camera.
And so are you making any evaluations of the officer's performance here, or what happens to the case now?
We are in the process of doing a two-pronged investigation. We are doing a criminal investigation that will be turned over to the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office for review to see whether or not there was any wrongdoing on behalf of the officers in the use of force. And then we're also doing an internal investigation in regards to the event to determine whether or not there was any wrongdoing internally concerning policies and procedures within the South Euclid Police Department.
So you're not making an evaluation of the appropriateness of his conduct or actions at this point? I mean, obviously it's a split-second decision.
Right. It would be premature for me to make any decision since the investigation is not complete.
And so the officer, did you identify the officer?
Yes, I did. The officer that fired his weapon was Patrolman Steve Wilson. He's a 12-year veteran of the South Euclid Police Department. The other officer inside the home at the time of the event was Detective Sergeant Rick Friedel, who's a 21-year veteran of the South Euclid Police Department.
Would tasering have been a possibility?
That's not for me to make that determination. Again, all this evidence is going to be turned over to the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office. I will tell you that the victim in this case, Mr. McNary, the decedent, had a knife in his hand and was in the act of assaulting this female victim with a knife, and
Her life was at risk.
her life absolutely was at risk.
So the officer's status now is?
They are both officers are currently on paid administrative leave and will be so per our departmental policy until they go through the proper evaluations.
And you've had body cams for a couple of weeks, or?
We purchased body cameras about 1 month ago, and we in the process of phasing them in. Not all of we have cameras for all of our officers. Not all of our officers have been issued a camera yet, and we are in the process of doing that. We need to train them on the use of the camera, how to download the video, those types of things.
So both officers had cameras that recorded the incident?
Only one officer had the camera. The officer that fired his gun had a camera.
Does that video clearly depict what happened?
It captures the event from start to finish, not only including audibly, but visually.
And it largely corroborates the officer's story?
I have no reason at this point in time. I viewed the video, and it certainly corroborates the officer's stories.
So how helpful is it in this case to have the video?
I think that the video is a significant piece of evidence in the process, but I think the media also needs to be aware of the fact that that's one piece of evidence in the process. There is still physical evidence that needs to be evaluated and taken into consideration. There are still victim statements and witness statements that are also a portion of the investigation. And while it is important, and I believe in the value of body-worn cameras, it's one piece of the process.
But this is the kind of incident that you purchased them for?
Couldn't have been a better scenario as far as why we purchased body-worn cameras.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Chief, could you spell, I'm sorry, the sergeant's last name?
F-R-I-E-D-L. D-L.
And his first name is Rick, R-I-C-K.
Correct.
And what's his rank?
He's a sergeant.
Sergeant. And then it's Officer Steve, S-T-E-V-E.
Wilson, correct.
Wilson, W-I-L-S-O-N.
That is correct.
Okay.
And this is what you passed out today, so.
That is a copy of the preliminary report, the information that we're releasing at this point in time. That is all the calls into dispatch that were made with regards to the night of this event. So,
And the body camera is something we can get at the end of the investigation?
correct. That will not be released until the Cuyahoga County prosecutor has made their official ruling, and we will consider editing and releasing.
Thank you very much.